Hey there, this is Pete Townsend from Norio Ventures, and welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by PAT FinTech, the training partner that demystifies fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. We've got Brian McNulty on the show this week, who is the founder and CEO of Fund Admin Chain, or simply FAC, which is a network for launching, distributing, and trading digital investment funds, connecting investors, fund managers, and their service providers in a digital distributed ecosystem. Brian just completed the first half of raising FAC's seed round, and although the fundraising round will stay open until February, I wanted to crystallize this moment in time with Brian as this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again, recording today from the home studio with Brian McNulty, founder and CEO of Fund Admin Chain, known otherwise simply as FAC. Before launching FAC in February 2019 after long boil, Brian spent 25 plus years on the buy side in asset management and fund administration before shifting to blockchain 5 years ago, but with entrepreneurial activities a common theme throughout his career. With that, welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, Pete.
Awesome to have you here. I know this is long overdue. It's just been ridiculously flat out the last few months. And I think we waited until we hit this critical point to tell this story. Just so the listeners know as well, I'm an advisor to Brian and FAC. So I'm going to do my best to ask the right questions so that I learned something as well. And as well as all of our loyal listeners out there in podcast land. So it's been an awesome nearly 2 years now, but there's a bit more to the story that we'll get into, yeah? So just to kick things off, Brian, I know your backstory pretty well, but for all of our listeners, why don't you tell us the story and how you got to this point?
No problem, Pete. So I guess I started out after studying maths and computing at uni. I get into trading, which was the thing I was really passionate about back then. So my career started out as a derivatives trader, working in the UK and Oz. Back when you couldn't sort of do that from home, you had to work for a merchant bank or an investment house to do it. And so on the side, I set up a software house, and I spent then 15 years running that. It was a bespoke software house and consultancy that then became a range of products across fund of funds, wealth, technical trading. And quite a few of those products were actually looking at automation or removing fragmentation across the funds value chain.
All right. So, and then what led you up to the point of 2019 of launching FAC, and tell us a bit about FAC and why you're doing this.
Sure. So when we exited our consultancy, it was just when sort of blockchain was rearing its head. So I'd heard about it in the FinTech Association. When I started looking at it, I thought that this was really applicable to the funds value chain. So that's where I actually started my blockchain journey out. So I set up a thing called a post-trade distributed ledger group with the London Stock Exchange. And we started looking at how we could leverage DLT in exactly that, in the post-trade space. From there, I then pivoted over to R3. I was there for 3 great years. And what we were doing in there is we were actually bringing the buy side in to R3's office, and we were looking at the funds industry is still quite antiquated, really. It's still extremely busy with many, many layers and intermediaries, all doing an important job in the current state and all playing a necessary role. But with DLT, we could see there's an opportunity to collapse those layers somewhat and to have, obviously, if everyone's sharing the same data at the outset and agreeing on the data, then we don't need all the reconciliations, the oversight teams, the failed trades, and we can drive some of the costs out and also drive some of the risks and the data lags. So that's why we went. I came out of R3 and we kicked this off, as you said, February 2019, and we've been fully committed to that ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we talk about this from time to time when we're on the phone with different folks over the last year or so, Brian, and that you and I actually came across each other back in 2015, I think, when I was on my last legs at BNP Paribas, and you were running the post-trade distributed ledger working group, as you said. And our pal Colin Platt, who actually reintroduced us last year, shout out to him. He was the one that brought me into the post-trade distributed ledger working group back in 2015. It's great that the vision that you had and how that started to crystallize, or how that did crystallize back then, that I think when we talk to people out there in the industry, that for a lot of folks, it's around that point in time. And it's really interesting that R3 formed around that time as well in 2014, 2015.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Colin and many others were sort of the visionaries that were working alongside. And I think what we were doing is we realised that if we tokenise the fund and we tokenise the cash component, and we do this with in the regulatory guidelines, then once we get to that point where we can launch a digital fund onto the platform and we've got the sub register immobilised and the cash on there as well, then we can transact in real time and we can store the same data. And what we went about doing is making sure we're not trying to displace incumbents. So what we're doing is we're facilitating the more forward-thinking incumbents to digitalize what they do, improve their services, and pass those benefits hopefully on to their customers and the end investors. So I think that's the model, and that's what R3 have really facilitated. When I was in R3, obviously this became a passion for me, and R3 are not building the solutions per se. They've got in my opinion, the world's best blockchain protocol to build on. And what we're doing is we're building one of the solutions in there for the industry.
Yep, absolutely. And I think what feels like in the last 3 months, 3 to 6 months, has just really become a lot more crystal clear. And being able to say with clarity that FAC is a network for the launching, trading, and distributing of digital investment funds, right? And being able to say that succinctly, I think it is a good thing. Can you talk a bit about how that has really come off in the industry and what the response has been to that?
Yeah, I think I still remember right at the very beginning, 2015, when we were discussing not just FAC as a solution, but basically more general. We were always saying, look, this takes a blend of regulatory considerations, technical considerations, and business, ensuring that not only it's a real business problem we can address that makes sense to address with DLT, but also that we are doing so that the business model itself stacks up, because there's a lot of new costs come into these new ways of doing business. So we've got to make sure that we create something that is actually going to be more beneficial commercially for those that are either receiving the services or changing the services they're offering. But little did I know when I used to stand up and give those slides what it actually meant. It's taken us years to crunch through the detail of the technical considerations, the legal considerations, and then really scrambling to make sure that we can come up with a business model that does work for fund managers and fund service providers and has enough margin to justify new fees coming in, such as a business network operator, and still pass on enough of a cost saving to the end investor and etc. That wasn't easy, and I think that I would imagine that most startups in this space are going to need to grapple with all of those issues. The good news is it's getting easier as a lot of these issues become sort of more common and knowledge is shared. But we're still trailblazing here. We're still working through new ways of doing business and new roles and responsibilities. And we've got to take a step back and remind ourselves regularly we do. This is super important that we get it right. This is people's hard savings that we're going to be looking after. So we can't get any part of this wrong, whether it be legal, technically, operationally, have a blowout or some sort of compliance issue or a security issue. So it's going to be hard. No one said it wasn't going to be, but we didn't realize it was going to be this hard.
Yeah, I know. I just noticed this trend of collaboration, right, in your LinkedIn profile. Looking at the fintech committee that you chaired in the UK from 2011 to 2014, obviously the post-trade distributed ledger working group, to R3, which is collaborative by nature, right? And with its heritage as a consortium before it became an enterprise software company, to obviously FAC now, which has a strong element of getting an industry to work together, right? So the question is collaboration in your blood?
That's a good question. I think the honest answer is no. Not to begin. Let me maybe just expand on that. Before I do it, what I think we have realised over many years of trying to offer services and then successfully deliver them and then learn in many mistakes along the way, is that you got to make sure that you are listening to what it is that individuals and organizations want and the right time. There might be a time when you need to sort of pull the amount of collaboration back, and there's other times where you want to make sure that you're pushing it. So we've got many different organisations and individuals working within our network, which we're extremely grateful to. But some it's lighter touch because the timing's not now, or they don't have the bandwidth. Others are sort of pushing us. So you've got to continually to be reassessing that and readdressing that to meet the needs of others rather than looking at it just through our lens. But no, I don't think it came naturally to me, if I'm going to be honest about it. I think right at the start of my career, and until quite recently, if I'm being very honest, I felt like, you battle to win in sport when you're doing that. In your early career, especially as a trader, you're not really sharing your strategies with anybody, and you're not being that inclusive. It took a bit of a change of almost of the generation to give us this, open my eyes and probably many others, as to also respected competitors and colleagues and so on. But I think you end up with this new way of being inclusive environment for teams to opine on things, to work together, is fantastic. It's something that took me a while to get my head around. I sort of struggled with it until reasonably recently, where I realised that by trying to keep everything separate and not actually having everybody in a single team and opining and so on, you end up with a lot of wasted effort and emotion. And I was also having other people doing it successfully, and hopefully I've learned from it, because I certainly think that's a key part to how we now do business in FAC, to give everybody an input, make sure they've all got a platform, and also that they're learning, because it takes a blend of skills to make these things succeed. So I'm being open about it. I always cared about everyone around me, but I don't think it was that inclusive to begin.
Yeah, no, I get that part about wasted emotion, in terms of if you're out there talking to everybody individually, that you're going to end up being directed down a certain path that can be either discouraging or it can be extremely encouraging. And sometimes that encouragement or discouragement can be false, right?
Yeah.
And so, I get that. So when you bring people together, you can kind of temper the different views and temper the different opinions and emotions, which can be quite helpful to your own mind as well.
And I think when things get to a certain phase, no one's got the bandwidth to be off of the critical path too much. And what I struggled a little bit with, I guess, with being older, is when platforms come up to allow everybody on Slack, for example, to talk about anything and to create different versions of the same thing. That sort of goes against the grain of how we used to do business. You sort of panic that people aren't doing what you think they should be doing, or it's not efficient because there's multiple views. But as I say, they learned the hard way that that's definitely the way that businesses, in my view, should operate.
Absolutely. So shifting gears a bit, you just completed the first tranche of a £3 million seed round by closing the first £1.5 million. Big achievement. What are some of the key lessons that you learned from this fundraising experience so far? And I'm sitting here with a bit of a grin on my face, because obviously being part of this has been extremely educational.
Yeah, long forgot for this one. Firstly, it's a fantastic achievement of the team, and it's what, again, just coming back to the last point, the fundraise is not just the guys that we put on the fundraise; it's been the entire team that have contributed to that being a success. So it's been a big milestone for us, and we are, just to make sure anyone that is listening, we have completed the first tranche of our raise. We've still got a closing of 90 days for the second tranche. So any investors out there, please reach out. We'll be very keen to hear from you. So I think a couple of lessons learned, if you like, or things that we picked up in the way. Well, the first one, Pete, I've said this to you directly, is that everyone tells you how long this takes and how much work it is and how it's another job. And you hear those words and you think you've got them on board, but you don't really know what it's like until you're close to closing. So the amount of time, effort, documents, questions, negotiations, going back round the loop, you think due diligence is complete, and then there's another layer of it. You've got to. So I guess the thing I would say, if you're not experiencing that right now, and you think you're maybe 2-3 months away from closing, I mean, there's a strong chance you're maybe not as close as you think you are. So factor that in. It's not all cases are the same. You might be, but there's a strong chance you're not. If you're not sort of needing to have a genuine additional job, then in my view, there's probably a lot more to crunch through before you get that investment. And I guess the second point, and I learned this, we were fortunate enough to be in the NADI Fin Accelerator, and we were being very open about it. We were probably struggling to get across what it is that we are doing and why it's a good idea at the beginning. And they really helped, because what they allowed us to do was to think about how the investor sees this, not what we're doing and how we think at the very end of that it might be appealing, but what is it an investor looks for and why are they looking for that, and what are the gaps in our approach in our company that we need to close in order for them to invest. Because what it made me realise is those gaps are not gaps to just get money. Those are gaps to us succeeding as a company. Because the two things go hand in hand. They're only going to invest in companies that are going to succeed. And they used a system called Abaca that was really sort of helpful to get the ball rolling in solving those gaps.
Yeah, really interesting. We had Ambra Subaran on the show from Kaiko, who are a digital asset data provider based in Paris. We had her on a couple of months ago, and she was talking about how if you are raising money from investors and your first half hour of your discussion with that investor is on explaining blockchain, you're in the wrong room, right? What I've also learned from this is that if for some of the conversations that I had directly, Brian, with investors, was that if you are speaking with somebody, with an investor, and the first part of that conversation, you need to explain how the funds industry works, right? And need to kind of paint the picture of how obvious of a solution FAC is, then it's hard to get through the rest of the conversation, or it can be.
Yeah, I think you're right. And look, to give the other side of the coin, because I think there is a danger sometimes that all investment opportunities are tried to apply the same process to them, and it doesn't always work. When you're doing a sort of network strategy play that's arguably got sort of, it's not quite as appealing up front for when the revenues are going to occur, or it's not clear that you're not sort of building one and then you can evaluate exactly what your cost of sale is and your time for a sale, and then you can sort of stack it up if you're building a product. It didn't really apply. We couldn't really crunch through how to apply what we were doing to that model. So some investors have got a model, it works for them, and your system simply, or your solution simply doesn't fit that portfolio. So I think you're right. It's worth better understanding your investors, or what ones are more likely to invest in you. We spent a lot of time doing both. So we spent a lot of time trawling the news to make sure we seen who's investing in network type strategies or opportunities, so that they would be aligned that way. We also looked to see who was investing in obviously blockchain type solutions and others who are from the funds industry or the investment industry at least, so that we don't need to explain blockchain and funds and network and everything.
Yeah,
the meeting's over before you've got to first base. However, and I don't know whether this is right or wrong. It just worked for us. You know me, Pete. We still spent a lot of time just sitting late at night finding a bunch of investors that, in my view, I've always went for this belief that if you can do another 0.001% effort, then do it. And we got an investor from a LinkedIn message. So there's no reason, I'm not saying that should be your only strategy, but I don't buy fully into the fact that you will only get money from those that are sort of hot leads or warm intros. Once you run out of your warm intros, what are you going to do? Watch TV or become successful?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I've quoted you a couple times on this podcast, Brian, where you said something to the effect of, don't worry about my resilience. I've got bucket loads of it and there's no bottom to that bucket. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is sponsored by PAT FinTech, demystifying fintech and digital finance for financial services professionals. PAT FinTech enable financial services professionals to transform their capabilities into the digital age, with dedicated virtual training programs geared towards those that can develop, deliver, and monitor optimally customized user experiences balanced by appropriate governance, control, and oversight. To learn more about PAT FinTech, Go to moneyneversleeps.ie/PAT-FinTech. One of the interesting things on the fundraising side as well that I noted was that even some of the smartest, sharpest investors that we spoke to that passed, one of them's that are, that I've got a huge amount of respect for, were like, listen, this just isn't within our risk appetite. You're going to have to change the industry. It's like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point.
To contextualize that a little bit, we want to improve the industry. You're involved in this, Pete. You know that. That's not just a sort of gimmicky thing. We want to improve the industry. We want to hopefully see that improvement passed on to the end investor and revolutionise the way that the funds industry operates. And it's good to think big, but be practical. We're doing that in a practical way, but we are thinking big, and we don't want to sort of do this half-heartedly. I think that it should change, and we want to end our careers in this space seeing that we made a difference and we improved the lives of those inside it, so that they're not got jobs that are ticking two numbers or moving a piece of data around for no reason. These things don't happen quickly, and investors want you, understandably, to be in here for the long term, and the investors will want to get out. It's their money, they want an ROI. So understandably, this is important to them, that you thinking about this from the point of view of succeeding with your own goals, but also that you're going to look after their money.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's a key point, because there's money behind the money, right?
Yeah.
Usually it's not theirs. It's somebody else's that they've been given the opportunity to invest on someone else's behalf. On that theme of looking ahead to the future and kind of stepping back from all of this, what are you most excited about?
More generally, I mean, maybe looking back to what we talked about earlier on, this looping it back to collaboration. So when you were talking earlier at that point, I was sort of thinking it is really true. We've got all walks of life, if you like, working together on an equal level in teams and with less hierarchy, certainly in our initiative. And I think that's super important, that we're sort of changing and having the right business blend, if you're right, but also if you sort of think through, there's bleeding edge tech guys, there's entrepreneurs, investors, there's regulatory experience as regulators, there's like sort of corporate savvy members of the team, compliance guys that have been working in the trenches for many years, that are super important to make sure that we have all the right go live considerations. So I think this new way of it's not that new, but this way of working is extremely exciting. It's also ended up, I mean, tech wasn't that exciting not that long ago. I was the chairman of the FinTechs arm of the Securities Institute. There was almost like we were asked in the room as a sort of last resort, all right, we better ask the tech guys what they think. The next thing, there's been an explosion of interest in tech has been over the last decade that's brought a lot of creative and media and artistic skills to the mix as well. So we've now got this right blend that can mean that we can actually make change. We've got more appetite to accept that we can make change. We've got the right teams to do it, and we can jump ahead if the incumbents in any walk of business don't want to change. There is now more of a chance of them being leapfrogged. So that in turn is ensuring that they also adopt this way of operating and have a broader skills. And as a result, we can think big, and I think we can achieve big more easily than we used to. That's exciting. And we've got to put this all in perspective. What we're doing is not curing illnesses, but at least we can do our part and help people with their finances and their careers, rather than just sort of having a culture that's focused on looking after themselves and their bonus and doing nothing. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And it's very exciting, and it's great to be a part of it, because, just thinking about all of my former industry colleagues with my long time in this industry, Brian, and by taking this forward and doing this and leveraging those connections and those relationships that we all have, this is something that can, like you said, help people enrich their own careers just by getting involved in something that can create such a wave of change.
I think there's enough of momentum now that at sea level and beyond, there's just a general acceptance. If we just look at it maybe through the lens of digital assets that we can use a sort of catch-all term. It's now the norm, and it is now something that most organisations are seriously involved in. And Pete, you and I work, as you said, in the large institutions. There's a never-ending number of people who genuinely were trying to drive positive change, and there's many people in my view who deserve bonuses for what they're doing. It's not there's now more chance that those inside the large organisations can successfully deliver this change too. That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And enabling them to do that. Anything looking to the future that you would like to learn more about?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's where to start. There's a full evolution of the technology, which is the enabler here, that we are excited about keeping abreast of and fast tracking some of the change we're doing, but also building out what we ultimately want to do here, which is to improve the industry and reduce that gap between the end consumer of a investment product and the product producer. So I get really excited. You know, Pete, I spent many years with like David Upton and Simon Lewis, and that we bought Trader Made International with the view of building a sort of a consumer facing product back in the day. This is another opportunity to do that, to deliver exciting products to consumers, leveraging technology in a way that allows them more flexibility, better, just call it benefits, but also gives the funds and the investment and the experts a new way of getting their products out, new flow and different ways of doing business. So in order to do that, and for me to be part of that, I have to continue to keep abreast and learn tech, new business models, and also ways of the latest ways of taking products or solutions and companies globally. So, there's lots to learn just inside what we're doing if we just stop there.
Yeah. And how do you do that? How do you stay abreast in terms of what you read, what you keep track of?
Yeah, I think it's part of it's just discipline and how you manage your days. It's so easy for all of us to just think we've got no time to sort of come off the wheel or on the wheel or get that balance right. What we're doing in FAC, I don't think we're not at the point, or we might never be where we need this sort of, those that are delivering what we've agreed to do are still opining on the strategy, the corporate growth plans. So you don't get the same sort of luxury I've had maybe previously, where you can sort of have some on the company and in the company. And I'm the same. If I was to just sort of sit on thinking about how we take this globally, I would miss the point of what we're trying to do, and hearing from the team and the customers what they want. But the same goes the other way. If I just sit in all the workshops and sort of go knee deep on the detail, then we'll miss the opportunity to expand and do what customers want us to do at the sort of higher level. So it's getting the discipline. I've got a disciplined approach where there are some slots in my diary that are dedicated to ensuring that I'm still learning.
Yep. I'm with you. When we kind of think about everything we just covered, Brian, and knowing you pretty well at this stage, and I said at the beginning of this podcast that hopefully I would learn something about you that I didn't know already. And we haven't got to that point yet in what we've talked about so far, where I can say that with confidence. So I'm going to ask you the question, not just for me, but for everybody out there. What is one thing that people wouldn't expect to know about Brian McNulty?
Not business related.
Whatever you'd like it to be, Brian.
All right. I guess I'm a qualified football coach. Don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
There you go.
All right. Tell me more.
Oh, no, I was, I think back in Australia, I was playing and I took a bad knee injury, which is something you can definitely relate to right now.
Yeah.
So rather than just dropping soccer as it is out there completely, I just got my qualifications so I could coach. So, right now that the only thing that I get out of that is to stand watching my 5 and 7 year old boys play with a sort of level of smugness that I think I know how I would teach them. And then when I try in the park, drastically fails. So not
Yeah.
going into much use, Pete.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I mean, I had my, beginnings of my medical journey about 15, 16 years ago, which culminated in, getting my foot surgery a couple of months ago. And the reason I'm doing it is so I could be out on the pitch with the kids running around their Gaelic football and hurling, which I, had been limited in my ability to do. But you're right. Never mind trying to teach kids soccer, trying to teach kids a sport that I have actually no experience in whatsoever, other than, okay, hurling is kind of like baseball a little bit, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think there's a few of my team back when I get injured that thought it wasn't much of a loss for the team anyway.
I'm with you. Great. Well, Brian, thanks so much. It was great to have you on the show. And you know what? As soon as we finish this podcast, I'm sure we'll be chatting pretty quickly. So thank you.
No, thank you, Pete. And just basically to make it very clear, it's been a phenomenal journey so far in FAC, and it just fundamentally is a result of a phenomenal team we've got, and also some great organisations we're working with. So we look forward to the next phase.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian.
Cheers, Pete.
That does it for this week, folks, and thanks to Brian for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Links and show notes for this episode are on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Also, you can subscribe to our Money Never Sleeps newsletter at moneyneversleeps.substack.com. If you're enjoying Money Never Sleeps and want to see it continue, make sure you hop on over to Apple Podcasts and give us a 5-star review. And don't forget Conan Brophy from Create Sound. He mixes and edits each episode for us and is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I help startups get their products to market, get customers, and finance their vision. You can find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or at norioventures.com, and you can follow Owen Fitzgerald on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.